Hey everyone. In this video, I'm reading to you my thoughts on Paradise Lost that I posted earlier this week. In Paradise Lost, John Milton, a relentlessly rational thinker, explores the irrational nature of religion. The epic's two primary antagonists, Satan and Eve, share a similar problem. They are both smart enough to see the holes in the very story they are a part of. In fact, Satan's argument for Eve's eating the apple elaborately breaks down the irrationality of God's decree. Why does a forbidden tree of knowledge exist in the first place? Why is eating the fruit so immoral as to justify death? What is so bad, after all, about knowledge? As Satan points out, what kind of God would be so threatened, since more knowledge cannot be anything but a positive, and Eve seeking it only commendable? And this is quoting Satan, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil, of good, how just, of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned. God therefore cannot hurt ye, and be just, not God, not feared then, nor obeyed. Okay, so the basic gist here is, wouldn't it be better for us to know and understand good and evil so we can avoid evil and be good? And how is denying us that knowledge just? And and if God is not just, then God is not God, and therefore we should not fear or obey him, right? So so Satan is very rational. He's very logical. Oops. So the dramatic irony here is that if Eve did know the evil in front of her, she would shun Satan, okay? Because Satan, of course, he's very rational, very logical, but he has an agenda. But the point still holds. Wouldn't God want us to know good and evil? And even if he didn't, why set this trap in the garden? And why would God allow Satan to conduct the temptation in the first place, right? If it's God, then God can, just as God cast Satan out of heaven, can't God just, put the brakes on this whole thing? So Milton's short answer to these questions is that the tree preserves free will. Only by giving Adam and Eve a choice does their worship actually mean something. But even so, this is a particularly restrictive version of free will. Either obey God or exercise your free will and suffer eternal death and damnation. Satan continues by questioning the motives behind such a choice. What can your knowledge hurt him? Or this tree impart against his will if all be his? Or is it envy? And can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? The answer to this question, of course, can be found in the Ten Commandments. For I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God. Okay. The fact that God is full of envy implies that there is something that he cannot control, or create. Okay, which calls to mind the God paradox. Calls to mind the God paradox. Can God create something he can't lift? In this case, can God create something he cannot control? Okay. For Milton, these kinds of questions are the true trap represented by the tree of knowledge. Milton's God is absent and inscrutable. His irrational nature an indictment of rationality, not the other way around. If free will requires temptation, faith requires an absent and apparently irrational God. If we could understand God through reason, there would be no need for faith, no pretext for free will. This implies that rationality is a human tool and an imperfect one. It marks the potential of human thought, but also its limit, right? So the idea here, and this is the perspective that Milton advocated, and not only Milton, but this idea that if that rationality is sort of represents the limits of human understanding. So it therefore cannot fully make sense of God or God's will, because God is beyond human understanding. So this is not to imply that Milton is opposed to rationality or knowledge. Okay, the truth is quite the opposite, as his highly elusive epic suggests. But as Dr. Faustus learns, knowledge is a poor vehicle for spiritual fulfillment. This, if anything, is the knowledge gained by Adam and Eve from eating the fruit. As Adam points out, learning the nature of evil involves finding it within themselves, while learning the nature of good requires its loss. Since our eyes open and find indeed, and find we know both good and evil, good lost and evil got. Okay. One way to also think of this is the idea that the good doesn't last. That this is part of the human condition for Adam and Eve post the fall, is that it's not that good things can never happen or they can never experience beauty, or some fulfillment. It's that it doesn't last. Okay, that part of the human experience is also feeling the loss of the good, the loss of that fulfillment, the absence and deterioration of what is good, what is beautiful. Okay. Sex for the first time becomes shameful, since it is now an escape from the inner turmoil of having been fallen. Okay. An important idea. One of the first things they do is they have great sex. But one of the first things they do after eating the fruit, they basically, to be blunt, they go at it. But there's a certain desperation to their carnal desire that did not exist before. Pleasure can no longer be enjoyed in and of itself, because it is forever accompanied by the awareness of its absence. So this is basically the nature of desire, of wanting something that one cannot have or that one cannot keep. Okay. How is one to live in such a state? Satan's response is to embrace its freedom, so dearly bought in the exercise of free will, represented by his challenging the authority of God. And this is, of course, backtracking a bit. 1. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Satan's rousing speech to the fallen angels is compelling, because it appeals to the heroic values typically promoted in the epic. Okay, and again, Milton's model here is, the heroic epics of Homer, particularly the Iliad, the Odyssey, and also the epics of Virgil. Okay, so he's sort of incorporating it into a certain style that is sort of intended to promote certain heroic values in a way. Part of what happens is that it ends up presented at the beginning of the poem, the beginning of the epic, as the hero, right? Because this is how he works this story into that convention, all right? And it's not that he wants us to see Satan as the hero, but he wants us to understand Satan's appeal. Okay, why Satan can be so persuasive, not just for Adam and Eve, but for all of mankind. So Satan's rousing to the fallen angels is compelling because it appeals to the heroic values typically promoted in the epic: freedom, independence, courage, hope in the face of certain defeat. Satan and his army have an advantage over Adam and Eve, though, their immortality. But what they share is their experience of the paradise they have lost, an experience no human sense can claim. Satan's response is anger, defiance, while Adam and Eve seek solace for an inexpressible sadness. The solace they are given is the same as Milton's, the assurance that their struggle is a part of a larger providential story that offers, though does not promise, a redemption that cannot be found in knowledge alone. But redemption requires accepting both their place in the ordained story and a life's journey of uncertainty and loss. And this is from the very end of the epic. Some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and Providence, their guide. They hand in hand, with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. Okay, so hopefully, this, my thoughts here give you some ideas for the responses due this week. Okay, in terms of, again, trying to understand, one psychological effect of being fallen from God's grace. Okay, and I just want you to focus on one, right? And again, you're focusing on, one section from the epic, one psychological effect, and either Satan or Adam and Eve, or you could just focus on Eve or just on Adam. But hopefully this response gives you, some ideas on where you might go in your response. All right, so thank you, and have a great rest of your day.